Welcome to Codepunk.io. This is episode 6. Bill Ahern. I'm sitting here with Michael Zool. Hey, Michael, how you doing, man?
How you doing?
So the subject of this episode is about TOR and the dark net, or the dark web, if you prefer. TOR, for those who don't know, stands for the Onion Relay. And Mike, you've done a lot of research on this. And the first thing before you jump into kind of the subject matter, where does the Onion Relay even come from? It's relay, right?
I think it's the Onion Router or Onion
Router. Sorry, yeah.
Right. So, how much do you know about cryptography in general?
In general, I know basic stuff, but I don't. I don't have a deep dive of it.
Right. So I mean, typical proxies mask where you're coming from, but it's only a single machine that you run off of. So you're proxying into one machine, which is then sending you to your destination. It might be masking your IP address, it might be masking your location, but it's not really doing much else outside of that. It's easily traceable if anybody wants to actually trace you. So the idea of onion routing is that there are actually multiple nodes. Now, it uses what typically would be public and private key pairing. And there was I wish I remembered the link, but there was an actual description of private public key cryptography I think it was on Reddit, and it was probably the most lucid explanation of it. So imagine I have a message that I want to send to you. So I put that message in a box and I put a lock on the box, and only I have the key, and I mail that box to you. Nobody can intercept it because it's locked, and I'm the only one with the key to it. You get the box. You can't open it either because you don't have the key. So instead, you put a key of your own or a lock of your own onto the box, and then you send it back to me. So now my lock's on there and your lock's on there. The box gets back to me. I can't open it. I can't do anything. You have your lock on it. So I unlock it. I unlock mine. I take mine off of it. Now the only thing left on there is your lock. I then send this box back to you. You get the box. You unlock it because you have the key to that lock, and now you can see the message that's inside. And that's
okay. So it's a confirmed transfer of secure access,
right? And so when it comes to the TOR or the onion router, onion routing, it's like the layers of an onion. So you have all of these individual nodes that you pass through. So there's you as the originator. You are accessing TOR. You're accessing the network. And so you connect to one machine, and that machine connects to another machine. That machine connects to another machine, and it makes several hops before it finally gets to its destination or finally gets to an exit node. But one of the important things about onion routing is that the node that you connect to only knows the previous and the next node. So it doesn't know the entire chain into communication. So your machine, you have a TOR client, and you are connecting to the first node in this network, and then that node then passes through a secondary node and tunnels into a third. That third passes its cryptography information back, and so it develops that kind of handshake, and so you're able to go from the first node through the second node into the third node. Then that second node becomes the first node, and then the node that you're on becomes your middle node, and then it accesses yet another third node. So this continues until you get to what's essentially the exit node. And the exit node then offloads you into your destination. And that's why it's called onion routing, is because there's several hops rather than a single proxy for you to get from where you're at right now to your destination. And it's nearly untraceable, and it helps you mask most of your activity.
Well, that makes perfect sense. Because onions have layers. I get that. How old is it? Because this is something I've been hearing about for a couple of years, but I've only recently become interested in it. Excuse me, my voice is a little hoarse today. I've only really recently become interested in it because of my phone, because I was more interested in secure browsing on my phone. That's actually what got me into learning about this a bit more.
Well, TOR is interesting because it's actually was initially developed by the federal government. So it was something that's sponsored by the government in order to create this sort of cryptography, this private network. So it's been around for a while. I don't remember the exact date, but it's an open project. The TOR client itself is based on the Mozilla browser, and it's been used. I mean, most of the web that we know is the web that's been indexed by Google. And clearly something like TOR, you have access to sites that aren't necessarily known to the public. That's why they call it the dark net, or the dark web, or whatever you want to call it. It's basically sites that you wouldn't be able to get to unless you had an explicit address. And there's actually a TLD for it, which is .onion, and that's for Tor hidden services. So you actually get to websites that are hidden services within the Tor network. Because one of the things that you have to remember is that although you are surfing within this onion network, after you bounce out of that exit node, you're still back into the real world. There is the possibility that you can be traced. Some people have found vulnerabilities, timing vulnerabilities, where if they know that you entered a certain node at a certain point and then there was an exit at a certain point, if they're able to map all of this timing together, they could roughly figure out whether or not it was you that hit a certain site. Also, if you're surfing the internet and you hit a site and you're not going over HTTPS, so it's not SSL, when you get off the exit node, your data is going to be known anyway. So if you want to stay secure, one, stay inside the dark net itself. But if you have to hop off because you're looking at a different site and you're masking your identity, you want to make sure that you're going over SSL so that at least that's also encrypted and you can't be traced through that. So there's several different security loopholes, that can occur in order for people to try to trace you. But for the most part, Tor is an extremely secure way for browsing the internet, and the Tor client in and of itself is a pretty good piece of software. I mean, again, it's based off of Mozilla. I mean, the first time I ever used it, I thought the most interesting thing about it was that when I went to maximize the window, it gave me a warning. And it said that if I maximize my window, I go to certain websites. The website can then tell what my screen resolution and size is because I have the browser maximized. So I should consider surfing in, a variable size window, which I would have never even thought about people tracing that information for any particular reason, but it gives you that fair warning.
Yeah, I'm actually still a little lost on that one. So if I have my browser window maximized, how does that leave me open to some sort of vulnerability by being able to read that data, that information?
It's data, right? So if I know your screen resolution and I know your screen size, I mean, and we can, as programmers, we can pull that from, we can pull that from either JavaScript or we can pull it from any of the, the variables that are passed back to the server.
Right.
I can identify you. So if you are a suspect for some reason in something, and
I see.
Right. So that
it becomes a fingerprint, basically.
Yes. Much like the timing thing. Like you can't explicitly prove that somebody was that same person based on the timing of the different hops and when they exited the node. But it gives you information. It gives you at least information to continue your investigation. Same thing with the screen resolution and the screen sizes.
Right. Okay. So maximize screen sizes and the timing can all just kind of count as metadata that can then, if somebody were to run that, I guess, through some seriously interesting software to process that, to understand that, it does become identifying.
Right. Exactly.
That's interesting. The other thing I thought was curious as I was learning and using it was, now on my Android phone, I have the both through the Tor Foundation I use, because there's multiple software that you can use. There's a couple different Tor browsers, but I use the official Tor browser. I think it's called Orbot. And then, of course, there's the actual Tor itself that it has to be active for me to hit the Tor sites. So how does that work necessarily? So if I don't have the Tor running on my phone to actually allow me to, I guess, process Onion sites, what happens with the browser if I try to hit an Onion site just with the browser?
With your standard browser?
No, with the Orbot. So if I use my Tor browser on my phone, but I have to have the Tor component running, it's almost like a DNS that parses those Onion URLs and says, okay, these, interprets it, I guess, for the browser. But I never really fully understood how that works. Right,
because the Tor, because it is a private network, essentially, anything that's a Tor hidden service is on the private network. So you can't go into a browser and go to any of the Onion sites. You actually have to have that Tor client because it runs specific software on your computer that gives you access to the nodes. It gives you, so if you can act as a Tor node simply by, it's not just when you download and you install the browser. You're not just downloading and installing the browser. You're installing all of the software for Tor. So you can set yourself up as a node and allow people to pass through traffic through your computer in order to get places, essentially setting yourself up as a proxy. So all
Right,
of that
to start facilitating those handshakes.
Right. So all of that software in unison is essentially Tor, but you need that software actually running in order for you to get to all of those websites. So it sounds like, at least for Android, in one instance, you have a browser that can access that network, and it probably anonymizes you, a little bit better. Whereas with the other one, you actually have to use, you actually have to turn on in order for it to be kind of like that sort of a proxy in order to access it.
I imagine it functioning a lot in the same that like a VPN would work, right? Like you can't just go and VPN into something. You have to have the software that will be able to make the appropriate handshakes and then make those connections. So I'm assuming it's similar to that.
Right. And like, I took a look at a couple of the clients on iOS, and I didn't install any of them. And I don't know why this has become a habit, but apparently a lot of the Tor browsers on the phone, in order to get the full version of it, it prompts you and makes you go and fill out a 5-star review in the iTunes store. So there are like 2 or 3, Tor browsers that look like they're really, really good, but it seems like that requirement alone makes me kind of suspicious as to whether or not
weird.
So it's not even like, pay the full amount to get this. It's like, in order to unlock all of your features, please give us a 5-star review. And I'm assuming it has a nag screen. Again, I haven't downloaded it. I'm not thrilled with using the iPhone for any type of surfing like that anyway, considering how deep probably Apple surveillance is into the machine.
Right.
I mean, and I mean, it's kind of, this is, this is a topic that you kind of picked, but it's something that I've been looking at and I've been kind of interested in. And it boils all back. I remember I was sitting with a coworker and we were having a discussion about privacy and about Edward Snowden, actually. And I mean, we all know with WikiLeaks, when they got that large cache of U.S. secret intel through Chelsea Manning, that all that information was dumped out there in the open, and there were documents about certain bases and certain people. And as much as I'm against the government spying on its people, and I'm all for free information, there comes a point where you shouldn't put people's lives at risk. And I think WikiLeaks at that time kind of took it upon themselves to just release all of this information without any regard for anybody's life who could be in danger. And so when Snowden did what he did, and he got that information from the NSA and started leaking documents, and it was like, as soon as he leaked those documents, he immediately ran. I wasn't sure kind of what to think about the guy. Like, on one hand, there was a lot of information that he released that was very important for us to have. The government was spying on us. They absolutely were spying on us. They were recording every single they had terabytes and terabytes and terabytes, maybe even petabytes of data from Verizon. They were basically storing all of the information coming across Verizon's wires. And so I kind of had this idea with, well, I mean, yeah, he did the right thing, but he didn't stay here to kind of suffer the consequences of it. He didn't stand up for it. Is that cowardice for him to run like that? And the guy I was talking to is actually the chief security officer at the place where I work, chief information security officer, and he's a former military guy. And to him, there was, without a doubt, Edward Snowden was a hero. And he was like, go watch this, documentary called Citizen 4. And it's an HBO documentary. So, I watched the HBO documentary, and at first I thought, okay, this is going to be a documentary about what Edward Snowden did. No, this is as it happened. This documentary, apparently he contacted not just various reporters, but also the person who produced this documentary. So when you see what you see unfold is what unfolded in real time as it happened. And when you meet Edward Snowden, this is before he released the documents, and you get to experience kind of his mindset and how he went through that process. And they met him in Hong Kong, and as he tried to get out of Hong Kong, and eventually he was allowed to get into Russia. But the documentary itself gave me kind of a new perspective on him, as I saw how meticulous he was about who he contacted, who he released information to, what information he released. He was very careful to try to not put lives at risk. He really thought that it was of utmost importance for him to get all of this information out there and do it in as much of an ethical way as possible. So it completely shifted that initial knee-jerk reaction I had to him. And instead, I'm kind of like, you know what, this guy, he kind of is a hero. He did what he thought was right despite the consequences. And sure, he fled to Hong Kong. He was actually in Hong Kong when he released all of this information. And he might be in Russia now, but he's in there because the politicians don't have the balls to pardon him and say, we screwed up, we did something wrong, and thankfully he brought it to our attention. So I watched that documentary and I started to think about cryptography and security. And so I started to mess with Win for GPG for encrypting email and encrypting, data files and stuff like that. Not because I think the government's spying on me, although, who knows, they could be, everybody could be. But we're entering into a digital age where a lot of things can get stolen. Your identity, so if you have tax documents on your computer, somebody hacks into your computer and they can take those. So you know what? I encrypt my tax documents. I mean, little things like that. I started to get more and more into that type of privacy, security, cryptography. And that kind of led me to the Tor network. Because at first I thought, this is just a secure browser. And I was completely wrong. It's not just a secure browser. It's an entire network that favors security.
Right.
Now, unfortunately, there's been issues with people and their hidden services, but it's a valued asset to today's community and today's internet. And of course, it's something that all the cyberpunk hackers would be on if this were the 1980s.
Yeah, I had started to think about it. Really, I think the first seed got planted for me when there was the kerfuffle that the government was having with both Apple and Google with releasing new versions of the operating systems, the mobile operating systems that would come by default encrypted. So everything got encrypted.
Right.
And I didn't really think about it much. And I initially had I had set it to not encrypt because I thought, these phones, and they're I'm already doing a lot with my phone. I'm kind of a power user. I don't know if it's going to drain the battery to do all the decrypting and unencrypting. If it's going to waste more processing cycles on the phone. And then, it doesn't. For anyone who thinks the same as I did, it does not. And then I started leaving everything encrypted, excuse me. And so then I kind of left it at that. And then just like you, just little by little, all the stuff, the Snowden leaks. And, we're reading every day hackers are, releasing people's emails of things. And I'm thinking, I'm not a celebrity. There's no reason for anyone to go after me, but there is. People can steal your identity. Lots of people who are just everyday working slobs have their identity stolen and somebody else, runs up a credit card or worse. So I really started to think hard about that. And that it didn't lead into, but it kind of worked in conjunction with, I don't really honestly know if there was a point, like a specific point, but I did start also feeling like I was very immersed in the Google ecosystem, and I don't have a problem with Google software at all, but everything was so automatic and tied in that, you get really complacent when you think about what are my passwords for things. And if I had Chrome, which I don't use anymore, I use Edge. I still use Chrome occasionally for like certain things that Google made it so that Chrome only works with, like say, I'm trying to think, Google Play Music did only really work. It just started working on Edge, but little stuff like that, certain Google services. And I felt myself becoming complacent. I thought, what if I had to use something else? Will I remember my passwords? It just started to dawn on me that I'm responsible for my identity and my data online. And as it just feels like every day, you think, I couldn't get any more immersed online and, have all my stuff interconnected, my credit cards, my payment with PayPal and all this stuff. But when you sit down and try to unpack it all, you realize that for people who are really entrenched, and some people are paranoid and I'm not picking on them, but they think that something bad is going to happen if you live your life almost completely in conjunction with all like the internet trappings. And then there are people like me who think it's a tool. It makes things easier. Things like payment or anything you think of, right? We live in an amazing time, But with all this great, amazing, wonderful technology, the issue of security gets bigger and bigger. And I guess at some point it just kind of started to concern me. And that's ultimately what drove me to Tor. And that's what drove me to Tor on my phone. Because more than my desktop computer or any other device I use my phone for pretty much everything. Watching YouTube, paying for things. For the most part, it is my digital companion. And so I started to decouple myself from being so thoroughly entwined with Google stuff, so that this way I was like my browser on my phone now. I still use Orbot for the Tor stuff, but my browser isn't even Chrome. I disabled it in my Android phone. I now use the AdBlock browser.
Right.
And and we've talked about this before, I think, but I'm not against ads on websites, but there's a lot of intrusive stuff that happens. And a lot of these malware come in now on phones through web pages, just like, the bad old days of like Windows 95 and stuff. Like now you're starting to get like, even if it doesn't damage your phone or plant any kind of malware on your phone, it's slowing it down. So I just started to decouple all of my like Google services and started using all these different things. And I just feel actually a little safer. I feel like things are kind of locked down now, and I'm way more present in my usage of technology. And that's because I'm being more mindful of the security.
Yeah, I mean, and like on my end, I've made several changes. I mean, recently I signed up for LastPass, and it puts a lot of faith in LastPass.
Can I ask you a question about LastPass real quick?
Sure.
Did you sign up for the payment service where it syncs across devices, or you just have LastPass on your device and you use it exclusive to that device?
So I signed up and they give you like a 14-day free trial. So, I mean, I have it all in the web app and then it's on my phone at the same time. And if I need to sync it up myself, I will. I don't know exactly how that part of it works. But I think it only costs like $1 or $2 a month. It's not an extravagant amount.
Right.
I was a little hesitant to put passwords into a website and then have a single point of failure, but my password for LastPass is really good, and I use a passphrase, and it's very, very hard. And anybody who has passwords, you have to use passphrases. That is the best way. It adds a lot of entropy. It's very difficult to block, it's very difficult to to steal, to crack.
Right.
The problem is that a lot of websites. I'll give you one right now, wellsfargo.com. I can type in my password with cases or without cases, and as long as it's the same password or same phrase, it works. It's not case sensitive.
Right.
So Wells Fargo, one of the largest banks in the world, wellsfargo.com, their password where you log in is not case sensitive. And I do know that there are a lot of little websites out there where I tend to use. There are websites where I use different passwords, and then there are websites where I use the same password, and then there are other websites where they're so crappy, I use my crappy password just in case it ever gets stolen. But if somebody cracks one of those sites and gets your password, they can then log into any of those sites, and that's the biggest concern. A lot of times with banks, or even with Amazon, or even with Twitter, there are occasions where people have theoretically gotten hacked, but they haven't actually the site itself hasn't gotten hacked. Your password was stolen from another crappier website. And look, you and I both worked for a company in the past, and I won't name names, but I know for an absolute fact that when we were at that company, passwords were stored unencrypted in a database. Credit card information was stored unencrypted in a database, which is a clear violation. It was something that I brought up to the CEO at the time, and I was summarily dismissed. And obviously I didn't work at that company much longer after that, and neither did you. But it was an issue to see that, but
Right.
seeing that and being a technology person, I know that it occurs in other places. So I decided, let me give LastPass a try. Let me change my passwords to harder passwords. And it has a little security thing that you can run. It'll tell you if you have duplicate passwords. It'll tell you if your password's not strong enough. And it offers to, regenerate them. So I decided to sign up for that. That was one of the first things that I did. Tor I started to look into because the idea made sense. So if I pull up, the Tor client on my computer, and of course I don't minimize it anymore because it warned me. You go from node A to node B, it gets encrypted. You go from B to C, it gets another layer of encryption. C to D, another layer of encryption. and so on and so forth until you built up what is essentially an onion and you reach the exit node. And then the exit node decrypts everything and you get the website that you're looking for. And when it goes to send that data back to you, it does the same thing in reverse. So if you're at node Z, it goes from Z to Y and then encrypts one layer on top of it, and then the next layer, and then the next layer, and then the next layer, because at every point that encryption gets, further increased until you get to the end and you're able to decrypt it, because obviously it's passed the data through and there's the whole, public-private key encryption thing. So it just made so much sense. And I understand it's not foolproof. There are ways that people can still track you and figure out what you're doing, but it's better than what we have right now. And what we have right now is where I go to Google or I go to Bing and I search for something, and then I go to Facebook or I go to Amazon and I immediately get an advertisement for something that I had just searched for. So they're looking at what I'm searching, they're tracking my information, and they're feeding that to me. And it's because of that I made another change. I switched to DuckDuckGo as my search engine. And DuckDuckGo, which I didn't even know was real. I thought it was something that was just made for the television shows and movies. I'd seen it in a television show. It might have even been Mr. Robot. I can't remember. And I looked it up and I said, hey, this thing is real. It's made by a team out of Pennsylvania.
Yep.
And
right near here.
Yeah, it uses the Yahoo Bing Search Alliance. So it uses their own core search technology plus various APIs, and it promises not to track you. And they seem very they seem very committed to not tracking you. And so on top of that, DuckDuckGo, they have their own TOR service. So you can actually search on DuckDuckGo, but using their Onion URL
Right.
in order to and they're so trusted that at one point, I think TOR used a search engine called disconnect.me. And at one point they had an issue because they were serving, I think they were serving pages from Google, and then Google kind of pulled them from being able to search or serve those pages. And so TOR instructed like disconnect me to serve results from DuckDuckGo instead, at least for the time. Some weird thing like that. But DuckDuckGo is a good choice if you're looking for a search engine. It's not going to track you and deliver your information to other people. It's available on TOR, and again, TOR itself is a great way to not just proxy yourself through things, but through multiple layers of encryption, get yourself to an endpoint and just make sure you're over SSL.
And in the Orbot browser for Android, TOR's official browser on the device for the OS, DuckDuckGo is the default search engine.
Right. And so of course no discussion, I guess, of TOR or the darknet can go complete without mentioning all of the negative things surrounding it. Not just negative, I mean slightly libertarian, some negative. I mean, people buy drugs off of sites that are on the dark net. People apparently try to access hitmen on the site. Of course, the most famous case is the Silk Road. How much do you know about the Silk Road, Bill?
Silk Road, I'm familiar with it being the Silk Road was a drug purchasing market, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and they were using Bitcoin to sell everything. But I don't remember how it went down. Wasn't there fraud involved?
It was kind of weird. So I don't know the full story, but from what I was reading, they were I should have took notes on it, but I don't remember exactly what the guy did to get himself put in jail. It didn't have anything to do with fraud. Well, the interesting thing is that the guy actually came up with a viable solution for selling illicit things online. He picked a perfect name for it, Silk Road. He set up a pretty ingenious marketplace. Initially, if you wanted to be a seller on the Silk Road, you had to actually purchase it at an auction, the right to sell stuff at an auction. And then eventually he switched to a flat fee. But the other thing that he did that was rather ingenious is all payments were accepted in Bitcoin, because of course Bitcoin is anonymous. You're given a specific, key or ID for your Bitcoins, and then you use that to purchase. So what he would do is it acted as an escrow too. So you're not just, if you paid for something, he held the money in escrow until you said, yes, I received what I was asking for. But the other thing that he did, which was pretty cool, was that because Bitcoin was so volatile, he covered the difference. So if there was a point to where you paid $50 for something and you paid $50 in Bitcoin, but then the value dropped, say down to $40 and the seller's expecting 40, he would actually cover that cost for that exchange. So it made Bitcoin viable and stable for this market because it had the backing of the actual marketplace. And then by holding it in escrow, you were ensured that you actually got the value, and the goods that you needed. And by, charging people for selling on the site, you kind of were able to clear out a lot of the knuckleheads who would, normally try to scam people over, because they have to pay an upfront cost just to be on there. So you have to actually want to be able to make your money back. And since it's held in escrow as well, if you were just, selling garbage or whatever, it would, you'd be found out pretty quickly, and you had made an initial investment that you'd soon get screwed out of. So, I mean, it's kind of funny that he was able to actually do, like I said, rather ingenious for him to actually be able to do all of this and put it all together. And then the FBI eventually, or the DEA, I think it was the DEA, finally caught up with him. And I think he's got life without parole. They hit him with running a criminal enterprise, selling illicit drugs.
He was computer hacking, money laundering, conspiracy to traffic narcotics, and having people killed, allegedly.
Right. I don't think any of that was ever proven as far as hiring people to kill other people.
No, these are accusations made by the FBI.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think he tried to offload, like initially when in court, he actually tried to blame the founder of the Mt. Gox Bitcoin exchange and say that he was actually the one who was running the Silk Road. I just initially set it up. And then the judge wasn't having any of that, told him, you're going to jail. And do we know if the case actually is, it said he was sentenced to life. I'm sure they're appealing. But has there been any update on the case that you're aware of?
No, I'm I just kind of pulled up the wiki on it really quickly, and it was kind of as of March 15, 2015. It doesn't look like it's come to a close, and there's also agents involved, FBI agents that were involved in their own kind of scandal around the case. I guess Ulbricht had paid off some agents. I guess for, there's a lot of he transferred money to some agents, and then they were charged with wire fraud, money laundering, but there's not a full detail. So it seems like it's ongoing still.
Right.
And there's a lot of mystery clearly around Silk Road and the guy running it, and who was getting paid for what, and what were the full crimes involved.
Right.
Seems very clandestine, which is what you would expect from something called the dark net.
Right. Well, and he even had a good name, the Dread Pirate Scott. So
yeah, right. It was his online handle.
And I'm trying to remember I'm trying to remember. I think so I don't know if they ever said exactly how he got caught. I think there was rumors that either his something occurred, which was they were able to sniff his IP address, or the IP address from which the service was running, and then there was another rumor that because the site was built in PHP, somebody was able to make a modification or inject some code during a downtime that pushed the server variables to the page, because obviously you do PHP info, you can get the server variables. So it released the information as far as where it was being hosted and where the location was. So those were...
Yeah, no, you almost nailed it exactly. I don't know if you're looking at the wiki, but that was pretty much it. So they said that the server was found via data leaked directly from the site's CAPTCHA.
Okay, right.
And then the security researchers, I'm just reading right off the page, the security researchers believe that the PHP login page was manipulated to output its server variable and real IP following site maintenance reconfiguration.
Right, right. Okay, yeah. So that's what it was. And I forgot about the CAPTCHA thing. That was that's just more proof that you should never trust them damn things. They make it hard to sign up for websites, and they turn you over to the FBI when they're done.
Yeah, I can't stand CAPTCHA. It's been very frustrating. I've had CAPTCHAs where I'm certain I'm entering in whatever weird picture they're sending me. I'm certain these are the numbers that they want, and I would fail, and then I would try to use the audio thing. It was a mess. Google owns that still, right? Or did they sell that off?
I'm going to assume they still own it. I know that nowadays, a lot of times I'm not even getting a CAPTCHA. I'm getting an HTML5 checkbox button that I need to click or something. I've seen a lot of them. It's really weird. It's still a CAPTCHA, but instead of you typing stuff in, you click this button and a circle spins around and it says, "Here you go."
I haven't really. Oh, right. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. For the lot of the stuff, especially things like, fortunately, Amazon, Microsoft is using it. Google's been using it. I know Apple does is 2-factor authentication. I'm using for a lot of that stuff because I have the app on my phone, both
Right.
Microsoft's and Google's. But so the Tor thing is really interesting to me, and Tor isn't the only sort of like, chained, encrypted chain relay. There are other ones. The names don't come to me, I know, but Tor is obviously the biggest one. And I did just kind of want to put out there that for people who are interested in learning more about Tor or downloading any of the tools and software, because there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of different things that Tor releases for people to use. They have a command line terminal in addition to the browsers and stuff like that for the multiple devices. It's Tor, TOR project, one word, .org. Interestingly enough, I don't see. So because you were mentioning that you've seen some stuff that you didn't trust for your iPhone.
Right.
I don't see anything on here for iPhone. Now, would that be because Apple tends to be a little bit of a stickler when it comes to other people imposing their preferred security on the iOS?
I mean, Android is clearly open source, and Google does not lock down their marketplace. So I'm sure that the Tor project, the fact that it's able to run kind of that service in the background, because
Right.
it has access to the operating system much more than you would have for kind of iOS. I'm sure that's a big part of it. You're not going to get a Tor service up on Windows Phone, and you're not going to get a Tor service up on iOS. And yeah, I pulled up the Tor project website, and I'm kind of looking at the parts for the documentation. It mentions Tor on Android, so that's an actual Tor project supported thing.
It's official. It's
right.
The
There is no
official-
official thing for iOS. So if you want to use Tor on your phone, I would recommend buying an Android device, preferably a nice one like any of the Nexuses, because you're not going to get the security that you really want on an iOS or on the Windows Phone. And it's kind of funny because I think the girl with the dragon tattoo, the guy who wrote those books, they did another book after his death based on his notes, I think, and it's funny because at one point they're talking to a reporter in it, and my coworker, he was relaying this to me, and he basically said, what phone are you using to the journalist? And they mentioned it's an iPhone, or like, throw your phone out, and they give him like, you need to buy an Android phone and install all of these like 10 different services or whatever to like try to make them encrypted. So it just goes to show you that, I mean, and it's my recommendation too. I mean, I have an iPhone, but the reality is that if you're going to, I don't want to say if you're going to be a hacker, because there's such negativity attached to that word. But if you're doing,
which is real unfortunate.
Yeah, if you're doing any types of penetration testing, or if you're doing, any type of hacking, or if you're doing any type of reconfiguration of various devices,
or if you're just really serious about privacy and security,
right? Just
like your own managing that on your own, because I'm sure Apple does a good job of it, right?
Yeah, you can get yourself an Android device. You can hack the software. You can sideload things. It's just something that you need to do if you're at all interested in security. You're not going to find that on any of the other, in any of the other devices.
Yeah. One of the other things I think that's very interesting about Tor, and it's sort of like that final bit to it, is that you're going to want to bookmark, or we have the web, so you can do a web search in any browser you prefer. But you need to find where those sites are, and they change. It isn't like you type in, mysecretwebsite.com and you get to your Tor site, which, so you have to find, typically Reddit will have them. You can, again, do web searches for them. Sometimes obviously you can go into your, Tor router, and then you can do a search in DuckDuckGo from there, to find the list of sites that you're looking for, if you're looking for whatever it is. But you're probably looking for things that, you want to be protected from, I'm not condoning any illegal behavior, but sometimes people just want to have whatever they're looking for to be secure. And those sites that have those, there's sort of like just those landing pages, they're not always there. You kind of have to find a place that's going to list wherever the current ones are. And sometimes it can be an exercise in frustration, because, you're going to go to a Tor site and you're going to look for something and that site's down, and it's kind of, you're constantly cycling through, what was up is no longer up. So you kind of have to get in the habit of knowing what you're looking for and where to find it. And I just want to say this, that obviously, you mentioned it earlier, when you have that level of complete or at least near complete anonymity, a lot of people are going to do stupid things, and they're going to try and put stupid things on the internet. And I would encourage listeners to remember what we said earlier at the top of the show, which is, no matter how hard you try, and no matter how good the software gets, there is always a way. There's always going to be some little fingerprint. Somebody's going to figure out a way to figure out where you've been. So this is a very empowering technology, which is why people like, myself and Michael like it. But it's also something that with that power of software, there is responsibility. And to do stupid things just because you think you're completely safe or anonymous is a fallacy. And to use your brain when you're using stuff like this.
Yeah, I mean, not to go back to popular culture, but if you watch Mr. Robot, that guy periodically cleans his computer, and by clean it, I mean he drills actual holes through the hard drive with a drill and a drill bit, and he throws the little micro SD chips from his phone into the microwave and burns them up. I mean, if you can cover all the tracks that you want, but I mean, obviously, if Bill and I weren't already flagged, clearly doing this podcast episode, somebody's looking at us. They can tell if you're using the Tor browser. If people are, like the Comcast or anybody is kind of sniffing, what's in your browser agent, your user agent. And chances are, I mean, there was a time where rumors were abound that if you were using the Tor, if you were using Tor, they were going to take a look at you, just in case you were doing anything illegal. There are, the FBI and the DEA do have task forces that are looking at other, Tor hidden services. I mean, it's so easy to set up. You download the Tor software. You can, every Windows computer comes with, IIS. Usually, if it's not already installed, you can get it from, installing the additional components. It's still on the disk itself. Every Linux box comes with Apache. It's not hard to set up your own web server. Install Tor, start up your web server. Then the actual Tor client can walk you through a step-by-step procedure in order to set up your own Tor service and get your ID and get your Onion TLD, and suddenly you're up and running. That's a lot of power. If you're thinking that you're anonymous and you're going to dump a bunch of stuff online, whether it's, dumping music, videos or revenge porn or whatever it is that you're trying to get out there, it's very easy to do. And you just need to remember that, the Dread Pirate Scott had a multi-million-dollar operation going, and they got him, and they got Silk Road 2.0, and they got whatever the third offshoot was.
Yeah, through CAPTCHA of all things.
Yes, so, and they have operations set up to try to see what's going on. Sting operations. There's going to be fake sellers that are, the authorities, and there's going to be fake buyers to the authorities. So you can use as many proxies as you want. You can be as anonymous as you want. Just be careful what you're doing. There's a fine line between exercising what you believe to be your freedoms and actually doing something criminal. And I'm like, again, when it comes to, the drug trade and drug rules in America, I mean, I think there's, a lot of things should be opened up and decriminalized. I think it's just necessary because, America has failed the drug war, but it's still illegal. So, this guy got life. And they couldn't prove that he tried to hire, anybody to actually murder somebody, but he had a website up, and all he was acting as was essentially, an escrow, service for these sales. And he got life for running a criminal empire. And he was young too. He was younger than me. So, spending the rest of your life in prison, I'm sure he didn't think about that when he first, set everything up. He thought he was just having a little bit of fun.
Yeah. And, I think that it's a really kind of, I want to piggyback off that. It's almost kind of repeating what I just said, but a little bit more to the point. And I just say this in general to myself too, is, technology is a phenomenal thing. It can always be used sometimes to the extent where it's so mundane. A lot of people like to complain about Facebook. Oh, Facebook. Facebook is a brilliant technology. If you listen to the technologists and the way they're trying to facilitate communication between people and make that intuitive and easy and frictionless. The engineers that Google has and the stuff that they're doing, trying to understand how people interact, is really cool stuff, right? Technology could be used to do really cool stuff. And then when you have these big companies or these really brilliant minds releasing this stuff for free, like Tor, and you pointed out there's so many different ways and free, legitimately free ways to set up your own server and run your own thing. And you can do all this kind of stuff. Hacking tools are free. It really is unfortunate when the best idea you have to implement all of this great stuff is to do something either illegal. And I'm not even talking about the kind of illegal where it's like you want to smoke pot and it's illegal, so whatever, you get in trouble. I'm talking about stuff that hurts other people. You can go on the internet and you can really mess up someone's life. It's unfortunate to me that people would deign to use that power towards that end as opposed to making just the internet a better place. It will be better when we're all a little safer online, when we don't have to worry about people selling our identities, not just like credit card identities, but even to the simple stuff that large corporations do, like selling our habits so that, we get inundated with ads for things. It'd be nice when we kind of shift away from that. And I think Tor represents a desire to move away from this kind of, fully entrenched and Google knows everything about me kind of thing, and move a little bit more like I have control. It's like agency online. And when smart, or at least I'm not even going to say smart, when script kiddies use powerful tools to invade someone's privacy or hurt people online or do things like any of the nefarious stuff you can find on a Tor network. There's a lot of bad stuff out there on the dark net. And it's unfortunate. I hear that, like you were saying, talk about hackers earlier, hackers get a bad reputation. It really, I think it's important for people who know how to do this stuff to try and make the reputation for hackers better rather than worse. And I think that that's important in terms of a point to make, because I've been thinking about that a lot lately too.
Right. And it's not all negative. I mean, the value of Tor is exponential. In fact, I'd read an article, or at least it might have even been a bunch of pull requests, but basically, Mozilla is trying to look into ways that they can fold a lot of the Tor functionality back into the Firefox browser. So it's basically ways to allow you to continue to be anonymous while you're surfing the internet. And proxies worked for a while and they don't work anymore. So now people are able to jump through several nodes in order to get to, the source of information that they want. It doesn't mean that those people are necessarily doing a bad thing. It means those people don't want to be tracked. They don't want to be tracked by, whoever they think might be tracking them. You want to be able to, sometimes you just want to be able to be private. Whether you're researching stuff on a medical condition. I mean, what happens when we get to the point to where, because of Google, because of Facebook, because of all of this sharing, you search for, information on a medical condition, and that information that gets captured and sold is sold to the company that you work for or to your insurance company, and they know that you searched for that information and you get penalized for it. I mean,
right.
Things like that, nefarious things like that, can happen on the corporate end. And that's just as nefarious as some guy trying to sell drugs on the dark net. So there is the need for anonymous browsing. There is the need for anonymous searching. And the technology behind Tor, like I said, the way it does its onion routing, the way it layers encryption upon encryption to pass you through nodes, makes it about as anonymous as you can get, in today's day and age. And so it's an extremely important piece of technology. It's important that I think everybody should know how to use it. Everybody should be able to play around with it. Everybody should understand what SSL is. Every website really should start being under SSL. You should know how to send encrypted emails, whether it's through a plugin in Outlook or using a Thunderbird browser. Those are things that you might have to do. I mean, you and I have exchanged, private information. We've pushed it over, WhatsApp for encryption purposes, because anybody could be sniffing, for content. Anybody can be sniffing for passwords or any type of other information. So it's very important for people to understand how vulnerable they are and what they can do security-wise to not necessarily hide themselves, but to protect themselves. You're not trying to hide your activity. You're trying to protect yourself and protect your information from people who would use it for nefarious purposes.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about, and this goes right back to the genesis of why we wanted to do a show just like this. It is the age-old hacker mantra. Information, is everything. And when somebody gets your information, The original hacker mantra was information wants to be free, but I think we're getting smarter now and realize that information can be just as damaging as a bullet. And it's really important, I think, for people to begin to understand how to protect that, even if it's passively, it's not like I expect my mom to sit down and go research Tor, but I do expect my mom to understand that the technology she's using could endanger her. And that's not doom and gloom. It's just anything is possible.
Yeah, I agree completely. So if you guys, again, if you want to know more about Tor, look up the Tor project online. There's plenty of information on it. We'll probably write a few blog posts about it throughout the years, throughout the next year. I mean, I know I put information on there on the, codepunk.io about DuckDuckGo. I put information on there about how to use Win4 GPG for encryption of email with the Outlook client, Outlook 2016. So just go to Codepunk.io. You can search for them. You can find more information on the internet. You can find Bill on Twitter at Neurothuster. You can find me on Twitter at Zool. Theme song is Perturbator's Theme by Perturbator. And that's all we have for this episode. So we'll talk to you next time.
Yeah, we'll see you.